Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Apparel Academy. In this episode, we're going to answer a question from one of our Facebook groups where someone asked, how do I quickly give a quote or estimate to my customer looking to get embroidery done without knowing the stitch count in the final digitized file? So stick around, we'll kind of give you one simple tip, one trick for you to not overprice or underprice and be pretty accurate in your initial quote to your customer so you don't waste your time. Now, before we get started, if you haven't checked out my other video on pricing and kind of learning the fundamentals of how to price your embroidered items, make sure to check that out. I've linked it in the description below. That is very important to get a solid understanding of the fundamental principles behind pricing your embroidered items. And kind of this episode will go into giving a quick quote that kind of adds on top of that. So definitely want to check that out because it goes into your magic metric and all of those things which are critical to kind of pricing your items right in this business. So let me kind of give a preface to what the problem is, right? Because a lot of times when we talk about pricing, we teach the fundamentals of pricing based on time. Again, if you haven't checked out that episode, make sure to check that out. But the question at hand is, how do you know how much time it's going to take you in order to price your items when you don't even have the final digitized file? Meaning your customer are just coming to you asking for a quick quote, quick estimate to see if it's worthwhile having a second conversation or a deeper conversation revolving your services, but you only have their design or kind of their logo and what they want to do, but you don't have time to digitize it and then get it back to them and find out the actual stitch count. How do you kind of go about giving an accurate quote without overpricing it and more importantly, without underpricing so that you are underselling yourself and being a waste of your time to take on this order? Now, the key here, the number one key here is to make sure that you have at least their logo, right? Because if you don't even have their logo, then we shouldn't be having this conversation and it's definitely impossible to give an accurate estimate. But if you have their logo, but you haven't digitized yet, you don't have the stitch count, therefore you can't kind of like back calculate all the numbers to figure out how long that piece of item is gonna take, what you wanna do is have an estimate based on the size of the logo that you have. Now, having the logo from your customer on hand and knowing the size of it, putting it into a design software, knowing the dimensions of it is going to help you give a very quick and accurate quote so that you're kind of within the ballpark and range for that particular design. And that's because the general rule of thumb is when you have a square inch of solid stitching, all right, 1 square inch of solid stitching, it's about 1,500 to 2,000 stitches inside 1 square inch. So let's say you have a logo from your customer that's a 2x2, 2 inch by 2 inch logos, a square logo. That would essentially give you around an 8,000 stitch count for that particular design once you get it digitized. Now, that is a rough estimate, assuming that that logo is kind of solid and it's a full square, because given a full square inch of space, it's going to contain about 2,000 stitches on average. So if you think about it, if you have the logo that's 2x2, you have 4 square inches in total, simply multiply that by that rule of thumb of 2,000 stitches and you would get a rough estimate about, hey, this design will take me about 8,000 stitches once I get that digitized. So looking at the complexity of the logo, right, based on the PNG file or JPEG file that your customer sent you of their logo, if the logo has a lot of negative space, you do need to kind of account for that because that negative space is not going to have embroidery on it, right? So if the 4 square inches we're talking about in this example is kind of solid and it doesn't have negative space, then you can do about 2,000 stitches in terms of the estimate per square inch of space. However, if you do have a lot of negative space, you want to adjust your range, maybe 1,500 stitches per square inch or even 1,000 stitches per square inch. All of that will depend on the complexity of the logo, but having the logo file on hand and simply knowing the dimensions gives you a very, very good and accurate starting point. Just knowing that rule of thumb that a solid filled in square inch of space has about 2,000 stitches in total and kind of adjusting that based on the negative space you actually see in the logo. All right, guys, so I hope that quick hack helped. Keep in mind, this is just for an initial quote, right? This is not kind of the end-all be-all formula to get exact pricing. This is for a quick quote to your customer just by having their logo dimensions on file. You don't know kind of, what else they want or the actual stitch count. This is a quick way to estimate how long that's gonna take without kind of going into too much details. But if you wanna get really accurate, and once you have this initial conversation in terms of the quote out of the way, and you wanna get more accurate in terms of the final pricing, and do give the disclaimer to your customer, this is just a rough estimate, right? Because you don't have the exact file that's going to be embroidered on their garments. So once you have that stitch count in place, then reference the video that I talked about where it goes into the exact pricing formula that you need to use in order to price accurately for your customers. That goes into your magic metric and kind of how long it's going to embroider that item, all of which you should know once you kind of get an idea of the type of garment the customer wants and the type of design when it's finally digitized. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, give a quick thumbs up to this video and subscribe to our podcast. And make sure to join our free Facebook group, Embroidery and Custom Apparel Mastery. I've linked that in the description below if you want to go in there and find out how other embroiderers go about pricing their items. All right, I hope you guys found this episode helpful. Look forward to seeing you guys next time.